So I have just finished, well, I finished last night, A Royal Experiment, The Private Life of King George III by Janice Hadlow, also published in the UK as The Strangest Family. And I mean, considering it's the private life of George III of England, maybe you should go with A Strangest Family. It was a royal experiment that failed. The experiment being George III determined to have a new kind of royalty. Royalty before that being very dissolute. Basically, that they ruled through power before, and I guess George III's thought is no, we're going to rule by moral example. That especially as a family, we're going to how we conduct ourselves as a family should be the model that our people should follow. And he tried, and he failed. And part of how he failed was structural. There's very much in here history of his father and grandfather and great grandfather all being at odds with each other. And this seemed to be a structural thing of whoever the Prince of Wales is, they are in, it's like the vice president in American politics where they have no actual power, but it's for life. And you're a young dude, and you end up allying yourself with the opposition party in the UK, in the parliament system, and making lots of trouble for your father, and being so stymied, you end up being a drunkard and a womanizer. It's striking how each generation seems to repeat the thing again and again, and deeply hate their fathers, and the fathers deeply hate their sons. Which, in this case, George III, he loves his second son, Frederick, and really criticizes and is just always on about his son, who would become George IV. But it's also a snapshot of the times of very much, this is the start of Rousseau and the idea of child raising, and of being tender, being you know educating your children, not just sort of shunting them off and not doing it yourself. This is very much the start of um, guilting parents into raising your kids right. And at the early stages, George III and his wife Charlotte are very warm and caring parents to their children. But as they get older, their anxiety about wanting them to be raised as good, moral, smart children translates into only criticizing them and hardly ever giving them any praise, um, resulting in children. The sons sh- are all are all sent away to other foreign climes, except for the Prince of Wales, who's left to stew at home, pretty toot sweet, and are criticized and get into all sorts of trouble. Um, the daughters have the princesses have the worst time of it. They're basically sucked into this family, sucked into George and Charlotte's ambit, and their only function is as to be to be the keepers, the comfort to their parents. They're not allowed to have any other life. And people who work there, Fanny Burney being probably the most notable one, a novelist and diarist, just like how deadly boring and stultifying the lives were for these princesses. It's like, if you feel sorry for anyone, it would be them. And George the Third is, well, I love them so much that I'm never going to let them go. And I'm the absolute tyrant. This is the nightmare scenario where you have needy parents who who want to rule your life, and they're the king. He actually passes a law that says that you can't marry without his approval, or it's just, it's horrific. It's horrific for all involved. And yeah, he goes from, he turns them into old bitter women who haven't been able to get married. And indeed, the marriages that do happen, most of them happen after the parents are incapacitated. Uh, in this, we also get the American Revolution happening, where George III was like, I am not going to negotiate at all on his side, and the revolutionaries, we're not going to negotiate on our side, which, you can envision bits in there where if George III hadn't been so hardline, there might have been a softer transition of power than there was. But he was very much, no, I'm protecting my my monarchy, my life. So that is an interesting thing, and the big thing, at least for me, from the movie The Madness of King George, which they don't call George the Third. Oh, that's a bad joke. But The Madness of King George is he has a break, at first for a decade, but then near the end of his life, he is completely incapacitated and completely insane. And the shifts in power that this brings. The first one, the regent, is very eager to grab power. Um, a couple of decades later, when the final one happens, it's a little bit softer, but there's just all the political machinations on top of the private life of this guy having a mental break. Hadlow does a really good job of sort of involving you in the family, and I found myself cheering for the princesses at the end, for when they, some of them actually did get to go off and have their own lives. Um, but it leaves you with this overwhelming thing of just like, this is early celebrity, and it's like, God help you if you ever had this level of celebrity, because a part of the rigor and the brutalness of the education that they give their children is the knowledge that they're going to be under the microscope for the rest of their lives, and how that twists everybody involved. Um, there's also the thing of just absolute subjugation of the females to the males, especially like Queen Charlotte here, to George III. It's just the utter thing of like, you never ever ever contradict them, public or private. You just submit, and yeah, yeah, it's ghastly. It's ghastly. So it was 600 page biography of this family, and there was some parts where I was just like, okay, I got near the end, and especially reading as ebook, it's like, okay, I'm ready for this to be over. Caught me up a bit more up again going into the princesses stuff. Um, Janice Hadlow actually does a really good job of kind of defending Queen Charlotte, who started out kind of very vivacious and intelligent woman who wanted to have a rich intellectual life, who becomes increasingly bitter and just a hard person to live with, just a torture to live with, and who wanted to keep control over her daughters, especially later in life. But there's a spirited kind of defense of her, at least if not defending her actions, at least getting you to understand her actions. Um, I find George III harder to reconcile, because it was before his madness that he was such a malign, malign influence on his children. And I mean, though Hadlow does a good thing of showing, you know, George the First, George the Second, the great grandfather in there, and how he's like, what he's come out of and what he was trying to escape but didn't escape. And you do get the sense of, despite, even if his mental illness hadn't been there, you just would have had a really, really miserable family, um, which kind of gives you an insight, strangely enough, into present day royal family, but also present day kind of just celebrity in a way, and us looking at famous people as our moral examples. And I have to say, I mean, my father was George, and there was a certain emotional reaction to this, which was like, yeah, when I was 17, I just left. I got out. And, the thought that I would be my age now, and I would still be trapped under the whims of people who wanted to kind of control my life and wanted me in a certain way, and were always criticizing me if I didn't live up to their ridiculous expectations. I had an emotional reaction to that. That was, so in an odd, twisted way, this they still have that power of celebrity. They still have that power um, to affect some kind of influence on you all this many hundreds of years later. And you can see that with, maybe that's a fascination with present day royals and people being so interested in them. Not that I can. I'm not really usually a reader or a consumer of Royal Anna. I'd be much more a Republican, which I guess is its own sort of revolutionary family dynamics in itself. All right, I'm gonna leave it there. That was my wrap up for a royal experiment. I learned about this from Sean the Book Maniac, who really loved this book, I think last year. Well, I can see why. I can see why. It was a good book. I think he spaced it out throughout the whole year, whereas I've read it one sustained burst, which is, yeah, I would have, if I wandered away, I would have never come back to it. So I'm glad I took it the way I did. So, but it still, yeah, it still had effect on me as a son of a George. Ugh. All right, more videos later.